This is Sports Talk with Playeragent3. I have a special guest today. This guy is basketball royalty in my eyes. He's the current assistant men's basketball coach at the University of Iowa, Mr. Sherman Dillard. How you doing, Coach?
I'm doing great. How are you? Good to see you.
Doing fine, doing fine. I appreciate you coming on the show. But before we get into a quick story, 1990, I was a young kid. Coach Darryl Robinson drove me down to Georgia Tech basketball school. I met the entire staff. I met you, Coach Cremins. I was a big fan of Kenny Anderson. So that was probably the highlight of my summer. 1990 when I met you guys. So just wanted to point that out to you that I met you back in 1990.
1990. I tell you what, Miguel, 1990 was a great year for us.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, went to the Final Four that year
in
Denver, and Darryl's been a good friend of mine. I know he was very close to Coach Cremins and Kevin Cantwell. You remember Kevin Cantwell?
Indeed, yes, I do.
Yep, and I remember those camps very well. And some of my fondest memories come from my time at Georgia Tech with Bobby and Kevin and Jimmy Hebron, the whole gang. And again, I had a chance to meet and spend some time with Darryl. Great guy. He and I've talked a little bit since then. And a couple of days ago, we were able to talk. I sent him some T-shirts. I told him he's got to represent the Hawkeyes.
Yeah. Yeah. So Coach, you Bassett, Virginia. You grew up in Bassett. I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah, Bassett,
Virginia. And it was pretty much during the time when the civil rights movement was alive and well during those times. So what role did sports play in your life during that time?
You know what? I just had this conversation recently with a friend. Somehow a picture showed up on Facebook, and it was in the 60s. I was probably about 7, 8 years old at that time. And it was a recreation center. They were opening up a new recreation center, probably about maybe 200 yards from my home. You have to understand that I lived in a segregated community. The blacks lived on one side of the river, whites lived on the other side of the river. And, it was odd to me that we had to have a black recreation center and a white recreation center. They were probably about 3 miles apart, but because of segregation, they decided to build a community center or a rec center for the blacks in that community. You know what? And I grew up kind of isolated from the white community in one sense. During my early years, I attended predominantly black elementary schools. I attended my 8th and 9th grade year. I attended a predominantly black high school, George Washington Carver, which was located probably, 10 miles away from my home. And there was a white high school, within walking distance, John D. Bassett High School. And going into my sophomore year, I decided to just transfer and go to school. I thought it made sense logically just to go to the school that was closest to me. And quite frankly, I went there just for the educational piece. I'd almost given up on basketball, if you can believe that. I'd gotten cut in my 8th grade year, my 9th grade year. When I transferred to Bassett High School, I just thought I would just focus on my academics and get ready for college. And as it turned out, I, tried out for the team as a sophomore, made the team. But again, I thought it was, if you've done your history, that area, South Central Virginia, Franklin County, Buena Vista, noted for some heavy racism. And in fact, Miguel, it was such that my mother, she was born and raised in New York City, but moved south, looking for jobs, opportunities. But she had this aversion for police officers. She hated the cops, and she did not hide that fact. And she would always tell us as kids that, don't trust the police, don't trust white people, basically. And again, as a young man, I'm trying to figure this all out. I'm trying to figure out, why is my mother so against, the white community? And again, if you look in history, I was born in September the 1st, as a matter of fact. Emmett Till was murdered, 5 days before I was born. So can you imagine the distress my mother was under, giving birth to me, and seeing on her black and white TV Emmett Till situation, that saga, how a kid was just brutally murdered, basically. So that was her picture of white America. But here's what happened. When I transferred to John D. Bassett High School, the predominantly white school, I made the basketball team with a guy named Ernie Nestor. I don't know if you met Ernie Nestor, but he's a longtime college basketball coach, coached at Wake Forest for a long time. He was my high school coach. But what happened was Ernie Nestor came into my life, gave me an opportunity to play basketball at high school in the sophomore year. I sat the bench all of my sophomore year, and basically he would stay after practice and keep me after practice and work with me. Long story short, he made me into the player I became. And my next year I averaged 18 points a game, the next year 22 points a game, and I get a scholarship to go to college at James Madison University, all because of Ernie Nestor. Now here's the thing, Ernie Nestor was a white guy. Ernie Nestor played a pivotal role in basically changing my mother's paradigm as to how she saw white people. Again, you got to understand, this is in the early 70s, and we were still segregated at that point. But, and I think the moral of that story is that sometimes it just takes one person or one conversation to change someone's mindset. But I'm not sleeping on the fact that during that era when I grew up, that it was really harsh. And the harsh reality was there was blatant racism. And when I attended John D. Bassett High School, there were probably 40 blacks in the entire school. And yet I think sports, to answer your question, the fact that I played basketball and some of the black athletes came in and enhanced the athletic program at John D. Bassett High School, it kind of eased the transition, if you will. And I think it helped everybody on both sides. And I ended up going to James Madison University, and at the time it was Madison College, Miguel, and shoot, there were 75 blacks in the whole school of 7,500 students. But I guess in all of that, you learn to assimilate because of association with people and being able to sit across the table and having communication and conversation. But more importantly, I think sports played a big role in allowing us to intermingle, and some of my best friends today are the players I met at John D. Bassett High School and played on my team, and we still stay in touch. So again, to your point, sports played a big role in my development and my understanding of the world and understanding, getting along with everybody and understanding that you have to assimilate. And a lot of times you are going to be the minority. All my life, I've been the minority in most settings, and that's just life. And I've grown accustomed to it. But I think my background, my experiences helped to shape me for the man I am today and helped make me a decent basketball coach. And I've been able to make a career out of this for almost 40 years.
Yeah. So speaking about James Madison, you played at James Madison, actually in the Hall of Fame at James Madison. How was that for you playing at James Madison, and why did you choose James Madison?
Again, I wasn't heavily recruited out of high school. I spent 2 really good years, in high school, and I had a little bit of attention, got a little bit of traction from some schools, specifically Richmond, University of Richmond recruited me. Bluefield State, I don't even know if that's still a school, Bluefield State College, smaller school. Virginia Tech, which was about 2 hours from my hometown, recruited me, but they prefaced everything with the fact they wanted me to go to a junior college first. We had an outstanding junior college there, close to Bassett, Virginia, called Firm Junior College. And during that time, they had some great teams. In fact, some of my idols played for that team, and Bobby Stevens and Charlie Thomas. And, I just loved watching them play. And so I was almost committed to going to Firm Junior College, hoping that I could enhance my pedigree and get a chance to get a Power 5 opportunity. Lo and behold, what happened was Ernie Nestor, my high school coach, I didn't figure this out. I didn't know this until later on. Ernie Nestor, my high school coach, had an opportunity to interview for an assistant coaching job at James Madison before I went to school there. And he did not get the job that year. He came back and coached me my senior year in high school. And what happened was, when he walked out the door, leaving Lou Campanelli, he said, well, I do have a player that you guys should check out. His name is Sherman Dillard. He's about 6'2", only weighed about 160 at the time. I was a really skinny kid, but he said he really shoots the ball well. He said, you ought to take a look at him. So lo and behold, one game I'm playing in high school, and Mike Fratello walks to the gym. I don't know if you remember Mike Fratello, the czar, the telestrator. Well, Mike was the assistant coach at James Madison at the time. And Mike came in and watched me play. And I can't even remember if I had a great game. I probably had a good game. And he offered me a scholarship right there on the spot. And I took a few visits, went to Richmond officially, went to James Madison, Ronald College. And I just loved, I love the campus atmosphere. I don't know if you've ever seen Madison College, but it's in a beautiful area, right? It's rolling hills and mountains, a very picturesque environment. Had a brand new basketball facility, only seated 5,000, but I thought it was a great looking facility. I think I just fell in love with the coaching staff. Lou Campanelli was an outstanding coach, Italian guy. Mike Fratello with his cool way about him. I kind of felt really comfortable with him. And then also, and I learned this, and it's maybe a better recruiter, college recruiter. One of the guys that influenced me to go to James Madison was a guy named Wilbert Buddy Mills. Buddy Mills was exactly 1 year older than me. We shared the same birthday. And Buddy Mills spent time calling me all the time when I was at Bassett. Like, I'd be in high school and my phone would ring, and it would be Buddy Mills calling. Unbeknownst to me, I thought Buddy and I were just close, but I'm sure Buddy was making those calls to me because the coaches were prompting him, give Sherman a call, try to talk him into coming. But I felt really close to Buddy, and I decided to go to James Madison. It turned out great choice for me, perfect environment. I had a chance to grow not only as a person, not only as a student, but as a basketball player. Had a solid career there. I think midway through my career at Madison, I had a chance to transfer. I could have probably gone to Virginia Tech, Virginia, based on my reputation. But I felt so good at Madison, and it turned out got a great education, met a lot of wonderful people, and continued to grow as an adult.
1978, 6th round pick of the Indiana Pacers in the NBA. Draft. What was that opportunity like for you? Just to be able to, to have that opportunity to be drafted into the NBA. What was that like for you?
It was, again, I just shared this with you, how I almost gave up on basketball because I just felt like I played in the rec center, I played on the asphalt court, and I thought I had decent skills, but I was just, maybe it's not for me. And I basically quit basketball. I shouldn't say I quit basketball. I continued to play recreationally, but never had a chance to play for a structured team. I never played on the indoor court until I got to John D. Bassett High School. But at any rate, I thought I had a decent career. I averaged 20-some points a game for 4 years, started every game I played. And when I got drafted at the time, they had, I think 10 rounds or whatever. Mm-hmm. And just to even get drafted, to your point, was a big accomplishment for me. And I just thought all I needed was an opportunity. So they called me up, and I tried out with them for about a week. And the reality hit that there's so many talented basketball players out there in the world. And as good as I was, and as good as I felt I was, there's a lot of guys standing in that line to try to get through that door to play in the NBA. But it's a great experience. Probably like a week I tried out, and they had me playing point guard. I had never played point guard before. I'm not making any excuses, but I went on and had another trial with the Kansas City Kings at the time. I know I'm dating myself. The Kansas City Kings, the Kings is elsewhere, but Cotton Fitzsimmons was the coach there, and I had a better tryout there, and yet still didn't make it. And so what I decided was, I have an education. I've given it my best shot. And quite frankly, what I'll do is I'll get a job. And that's what happened. I ended up coaching. The one thing athletes, and I tell guys this all the time, when you're in college, you're not on a free ride. You got a scholarship, but you're working for that scholarship. But man, you get free meals. You get per diem sometimes, and so here I am now, graduating from from James Madison, and now I don't have that free meal. And so I started teaching coaching ninth grade basketball in my community, Laurel Park High School, and that started my career as a coach.
Mm-hmm. Now, Coach, you've been in the game for 40 years. You've been in the basketball world probably longer than that. But you've coached at James Madison. You've coached at California. Of course, I know you from Georgia Tech, and you're currently at the University of Iowa. But I want to highlight the fact that you coached at the University of Maryland with none other than the legendary Len Bias. Man, talk about that experience of actually coaching Len Bias.
It was phenomenal. Len grew up there, not too far from the University of Maryland. And his high school, Northwestern High School, was probably a stone's throw away. He was always over at College Park, hanging out at Coalfield House, working out with our guys and stuff. And, we always thought he would be a talent. You could see it with his body, his build, that jump shot he had. But I can say this: some people didn't get to see a lot of Len Bias because we watched him every day in practice, and he was doing some phenomenal things in practice. But one of the true most outstanding players I've ever coached, and to your point, I've coached for 40 years. I've coached a lot of great ones: Kevin Johnson, Kenny Anderson. The list can go on. But Lenny Bias was special indeed, and I know people make judgments based on what they read, and they can have their own narrative about this situation. But I can unequivocally say that Len Bias was a great young man, a wholesome young man from a great family. Len Bias just happened to be the victim of, I'm going to try something, and sometimes you don't get a second chance, It's very unfortunate. I had left Maryland that, people thought I was crazy. I left the University of Maryland to go to California to coach with my college coach, Lou Campanelli. He had decided to take the job there. He had done a great job at James Madison building that program. And so he gave me a call and asked me to leave Maryland and join him at Cal. And I said, who would be the other assistant? He says, well, I'm thinking about hiring Ernie Nestor, which was my high school coach. And I said, great. I said, that would be like a family situation. So Miguel, what we did was I decided to leave the University of Maryland with Len Bias coming into his senior year, and knowing that he was one of the best players in the country. But I did it because I had so much respect for Lou Campanelli, and I loved Ernie Nestor, my high school coach. And we went to Cal and kind of resurrected that program, if you will, and had the chance and the privilege of coaching Kevin Johnson, KJ, who turned out to be a great player. Yeah. But, when I got the news of Lenny's passing, I was, obviously I was heartbroken and cried for, I couldn't stop crying. But he was phenomenal in every way, and he brought it every day. I think sometimes people forget how much work goes into being that level of talent. But Len brought it every day he came to work, and played as hard in practice as you saw him on national TV. Unbelievable. And at the time I was young, Miguel, so I was still thinking I could still play. So I would practice with the guys. I'd play with Lenny, Buck Williams, Albert King. I'd be out on the floor. And, and then trying at that time, had been at Maryland 4 years, maybe. Now trying to guard on Lenny Bias in practice, and he's unstoppable. You couldn't guard him, he was just so strong physically.
What was, man, I'm thinking about those days. What was the competitive nature like in the ACC with guys like Len Bias? You got Michael Jordan was there at the time at Carolina. You got Dean Smith, Lefty Drizel, Jim Valvano, Coach K. Like, what was it like, man, just to be in that atmosphere?
Here I am, I'm a young coach, and I have to credit Lefty for giving me the coaching opportunity. Lefty hired me. I was coaching ninth grade basketball at Laurel Park High School in Virginia. And I get a call that spring from Lefty, and I'm thinking, why is Coach Drizel calling me, And he goes, hey, Sherman, what's up? And I go, everything's great, Coach, how are you? He says, what are you doing there? I said, coaching high school basketball. He said, you ever thought about coaching college? And think about that call. You're 23 years old, and you get a call from the head coach at the University of Maryland. And that whole league I used to idolize. They didn't get as much TV exposure during that time. They would have a game of the week maybe during the week, and then on Saturday, you'd see those games, could be NC State versus Maryland, et cetera. But I think as a young kid, I just idolized all of those coaches. You mentioned Dean Smith, and when Jim Valvano got into the league, how tough he was. What's the guy's name at Wake Forest? Carl Tacey at Wake Forest. Just some great coaches and great games and great venues, and and to your point, the individual talent in that league. I say it all the time. I don't think it's ever gotten back to that level. I think kids don't stay long enough. You think about it. Buck Williams stayed at the University of Maryland to his junior year. Len was there for a whole 4 years. That doesn't happen in this day and age. Now, kids are leaving so early, so you don't get that connection with the individuals or teams as much as you used to during the 70s and 80s when I was there. But phenomenal games, and you can think about this. Before I got there, I don't know what year they changed it, but only one team in the ACC got a chance to go play an NCAA tournament. Remember the great teams Lefty had with Tom McMillan and John Lucas and Mo Howard? Only one team got a chance to play it, in the NCAA tournament. And other teams went to the NIT. But phenomenal league, great individual talent, great coaches. And here I am, 24, 25, 26 years old, sitting on the bench right beside Lefty Drizel, coaching against some of the greatest athletes in the world, and watching Michael Jordan come into Coalfield House. And you've seen this highlight forever and ever. And I tell people, I was sitting right courtside, he comes down the floor, gets a steal. Now, they're probably up about 10 points, so the game's over. And then Michael does this little rock the cradle kind of dunk. Shoot, I almost stood up and started cheering, and he's stuck it against us. But, to witness that, to see Mike Jaminski, I could go on and on, Gene Banks at Duke, those type of players. It was a wonderful experience for me, and all of that shaped me into the coach I am today, and having an opportunity to coach those great players in those great venues and coach against some of those great coaches.
Coach, do you still keep in contact, keep in touch with Len Bias family?
I haven't talked with them a lot. I've seen them. I've watched them on Facebook. Mother, I have not talked to them in a couple of years, quite frankly. I know she went on a speaking tour and went all around the country speaking about, her son's untimely death and things that went into that. But Lenice was unbelievably a sweet woman. Obviously at every game would come into practice, and the courage it took for her to live through that. And as you very well know, she lost another son.
Yeah.
I don't remember that, but lost another son. And ironically enough, I think I was coaching at Georgia Tech when that happened, and I was in town recruiting Grant Hill. And I heard that story, how it happened. So, it's just very unfortunate. No family should go through that. And my heart goes out to the whole family, quite frankly.
Fast forward, Coach, you're at Georgia Tech, 6 seasons under Bobby Cremins. Back in the ACC, you're coaching Lethal Weapon 3. And particularly, Coach Kenny Anderson. What was it like to coach a guy that came into the league as a freshman and just he pretty much took the whole country by storm? What was that whole situation like down in Atlanta?
Bobby had hired me that summer. Actually, it offered me the job in July. I accepted the job in August. And our number one recruit at that time was Kenny Anderson. So the background, they had already been recruiting Kenny, obviously. But Bobby, the way Bobby handled recruiting, sometimes when it was the top guy we were going after, all of us would go in. So Bobby, Kevin Cantwell, and myself would spend some time in New York City. And I remember the first meeting I had with Kenny and his mother. I was blown away by how excited he was about Georgia Tech. And to your point, I'm saying, here's the #1 kid in the country, a legend already in high school. And I said, here we are, we have a chance to get this young man. And sure enough, he visited us, had a great visit. And I think we were up against Carolina, Syracuse, and, probably we hit a home run by getting him to commit and sign with us. That was my first year on the bench at Georgia Tech. And to have a young man like that I think sometimes people get caught up in with his aura and his legend. They thought he was, a prima donna, thinking he was better than this and that. And Kenny was so humble and coachable, and did everything he had to do. Handle his business like a professional. And to watch him come into that league, and as we talked about how tough that league was as a freshman, to come in and play at the level that he played at was a wonderful thing to watch, to witness, to be there courtside, to see him in practice, to see him go up against the Dukes of the world, and how he had so much maturity. His skill set was off the charts. His playmaking skills was off the chart. Shot it respectably enough that people had to honor that jump shot. But boy, could he dance with the basketball. And I know you remember this clip. He was going against Bobby Hurley at Duke, and he kind of went between his legs behind his back, and then goes unbelievable. But he was a talent, no doubt about it. And I'll be very honest with you. Like, sometimes when I hear about superstars, and before I got there, because I wasn't recruiting Kenny, I was at Cal Berkeley at the time, and I started hearing the stories about how good Kenny Anderson was. A lot of times I don't buy the hype. I'm thinking, well, there's some sensationalism going on here. But then when you see him up close and personal, then you realize, wow, he's legit. Yeah. And it's the same thing happened with Len Bias. But Kenny was just, and he's, we stay in touch, and through social media, et cetera. Yeah. He's coaching at Fisk University, and I'm happy to see him do that. But boy, did he have some fantastic games. And you mentioned Lethal Weapon 3. You think about this team: Kenny Anderson, Dennis Scott, Brian Oliver. And we went on a tear that year in 1990, unbelievable. And I think what makes great teams is, you have individual talent, but I think what made us a great team and a team that was capable of going to the Final Four was how that team meshed. Mm-hmm. And I think, as good as Dennis Scott was, Dennis needed Kenny Anderson to be really good, right, and vice versa. And I think they played off one another. And here's a guy that, I think doesn't get as much publicity from that thing, but maybe because the stats went to that level. But Brian Oliver was the glue for that team. Yeah. And in more ways than one, I think I've always thought this: to have a great team, you have to have you have to have players that are in control of the locker room. And I thought Dennis, was able to defer to Brian Oliver because he seemed to be the true leader of that team in one sense. So he was good in the locker room with those guys, holding those guys accountable. And you need a player in the locker room. And I thought, Brian was the guy that carried Bobby Cremins voice in the locker room. And I think that's why we were successful.
Now, Coach, I got a couple of more questions for you. Sure. Before we get out, we got about 10 minutes left. This HBCU trend with Deion Sanders down at Jackson State, you got Eddie George, who's also coaching at a HBCU. Kenny Anderson now at Fisk, and Chucky Brown, he's the head men's basketball coach at St. Augustine University in Raleigh, North Carolina.
I didn't know that. Chucky.
Yeah. What do you think about this trend?
Well, as you go back historically, all the great athletes played at HBCU teams. Think about that. And it wasn't until, and again, wasn't until there was a big football game and Alabama was playing Southern Cal in football. And Southern Cal comes to Alabama and blows them out because they had a lot of brothers on the team. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to stereotype, but And then all of a sudden, Bear Bryant says he's not going to recruit black athletes. All of a sudden, he decides, shoot, I got to change my thinking there. And I think it goes back to those years. And I think you see a kind of a paradigm shift in some of the athletes. I think Kenny Blakely is at Howard, right?
Yes.
Kenny played at Duke. And he's
on
some top player, one of the top 20 players in the country. I don't know. I don't want to call it a trend yet, but I see the needle moving a little bit in that direction where outstanding top black athletes are considering and giving some major consideration to attending those type schools. And I think it's a good thing. The issues that those programs deal with is, can they have the resources to compete with the Power 5 programs? And I love what Deion's doing in football. Deion already had a big name, but I think he's taking it to a whole new level now with the success he's having and the way he communicates, the type of athletes he's getting. Again, I don't know if we're here yet where they're going to take over college basketball, but I think it's trending upward, and it's a good thing to see, quite frankly.
Real quick, Coach. What's give me one thing that you carry with you to this day that Coach Cremins and Coach Lefty Driesell taught you?
Well, I think there's different things. Coach Driesell, first of all, I was in awe of him. I put him on a pedestal. I'm like, holy shit, this is Lefty Driesell, because of all the exposure he had. And I started working basketball camps with him when I was a college student playing at James Madison. But the one thing I learned from him is he had this unbelievable work ethic. Like he was driven to succeed. And he taught me that work ethic. I think I worked hard in school. I worked hard at my craft, basketball. I became a good student, but he really, really drove that home to me. And witnessing him work and how he went about his craft, you couldn't slack off when you work for Lefty, So I think I learned that from him, and kind of like he had a saying. He always said, "The harder you work, the luckier you get." He's always saying that, and I think that's true in so many ways. I think the one thing I learned from Bobby was, and I take from Bobby, and this is hard to say because I think I learned so many things from both guys and all the guys I worked with. Bobby had a special way of dealing with people. He had, like, to be able to coach guys like Kenny Anderson, James Forrest, Dennis Scott, obviously X and O's matter, defensive things matter, but Bobby was very keen on building relationships with guys. And, I'd walk into our office suite and the door would be closed and he'd be talking to Malcolm Mackey, or he'd have Kenny Anderson one-on-one, or Dennis Scott. And he taught me the need to be able to have those kind of really deep relationships with your athletes. And those guys will run through a wall for you. And that's the way they are with Bobby right now. And Lefty had the same thing. Lefty was very close with his players as well. Lou Campanelli, I think I've been blessed to be able to work with so many good people. Here now, presently, this is my 13th season at the University of Iowa, working for Fran McCaffrey. There's no better person in the world. I mean, and he checks all the boxes. Unbelievable coach. Good with people, build relationships. Again, he's unbelievable in every way, and I've been fortunate to work with those kind of people, and I think all of those guys have shaped my life. And I'm here now in my 13th year as an assistant. Could I be a head coach again? I was head coach at James Madison, head coach in Indiana State. I would love to have an opportunity, but I'm not. I don't want to say I'm content, but I'm happy here at the University of Iowa, and it's the longest I've been any place, quite frankly.
Well, Coach, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I have 1,001 more questions that I can ask you. Hopefully, you'll come back on and we can get back to it.
I'll be willing to do that. I appreciate you, and Daryl spoke extremely highly of you, and I didn't even hesitate. I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it, and I'm glad we were able to connect.
Yeah,
Wish you all the
1990.
best, my man.
1990. That's when I met you.
1990.
Long
You know what?
time
I always say that. I always talk about 1990, but you know how many years ago that was?
Yeah, I
You
was
were a pop dead, probably, right?
14 years old.
Oh, get out of here! Yeah.
14 years old.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but yeah, I appreciate it. We'll keep in contact. Much success to you on the season. And
All
again, thanks for coming on Sports Talk with Player Agent 3.
All
Everybody listed Coach Sherman Dillard.
This is Sports Talk with Player